Hello everyone, my name is Faisal Khan from One Extraordinary Life, and over the past couple of days clients of mine and friends of mine have been asking me, what does the science of well-being, which is one of my specialty areas and its application in organizations and towards leadership, what does this science of well-being have to say about us as human beings during times of ill-being or times of crisis? So instead of creating a long video, I've decided to create a series of videos that will each build upon each other. And these are going to be available on my website, the number 1extraordinarylife.com. And I'll also make them available through other social media outlets as well. The first video today is going to be an introduction of why we as human beings behave the way that we do during times of crisis. The second video is going to be about what does the science of well-being have to say about us coping during times of crisis. And the third video, or subsequent videos, are going to be about us functioning more effectively during these times of crisis. And this is going to be particularly important as many of us are socially isolating ourselves or as we start to work from home. Before I get started, I'd also like to acknowledge that these are indeed challenging times. The whole world is engulfed in this coronavirus disease 2019, more commonly known as COVID-19. And so I would advise everyone to follow the guidance that your local authorities are providing you, whether it's to remain at home, don't gather, only go out to get absolutely necessary essentials, otherwise take proper precautions. Let's talk about why we behave the way that we do during times of crisis. So I went to my local supermarket the other day to buy some hand sanitizer and it just wasn't available. It was all sold out. And so just out of curiosity, I checked the aisles that sold toilet paper because I heard amidst this COVID-19 crisis, toilet paper is flying off the shelves and the aisle was all sold out. I had heard that baby wipes are selling really fast as well, so I checked that aisle and they were all sold out too. And so why do we behave the way that we do during times of crisis where we might tend to hoard things, for example? So during times of crisis and threat, many things are happening, but two things are worth pointing out. First is survival mode kicks in, or fight or flight mode. And this is our body's way of telling us, hey, you need to prepare for this threat. Adrenaline is pumped into the system, our heart rate increases, and we get more active. The second thing that gets triggered is our emotions in our brain. They go on autopilot and they tell us, hey, you need to focus on this one threat. Everything else, don't need to focus on that, just focus on this one threat. So our body gets prepared, our mind gets prepared to counter this threat. Let me illustrate this by an extreme example. So let's just assume that I have a grizzly bear that's roaming freely in my front yard. Obviously, my fight or flight mode will kick in. Adrenaline will be pumped into my body. I'll get more active. I'll lock the doors. I'll perhaps hide. I'll call the police. I'll be more vigilant. I'll be more active. My brain will say, okay, everything else, don't focus on that. Just focus on this grizzly bear. My sole purpose will be to survive that moment. Now I contrast that with a visit to the zoo where I see another grizzly bear, but this time this grizzly bear is contained. And so the threat won't be nearly as high as it was when the grizzly bear was in my front yard. But in order to make a good assessment of that threat, I had to invoke the logical part of my brain. And when we're in fight or flight mode, and when we're in a mode where we're triggered by fear and threat, what happens is it's difficult for that logical part of the brain to engage. Jonathan Haidt, famous psychologist, uses a great metaphor. He calls it the elephant and the rider. And what he says is, There's certain parts of our brain that go on autopilot. And that part of brain certainly is on autopilot when we're in a state of crisis or threat. Fear-based emotions take over, just like an elephant. And the logical part of the brain is like a rider trying to control that elephant. Well, good luck, it's not going to happen. The elephant has taken over, and the rider is a person, and he or she won't be able to control that elephant. This is why when we go to the supermarket and we're triggered by threat, by fear, we don't make that logical decision. And in these times of COVID-19, we need to make a logical assessment of the situation so that we make good decisions. So the science of well-being tells us, in order to make those good decisions, we definitely need to focus on the fear and the threat and come to terms with it. But at the same time, we also need to come from a position of strength. What does that mean, coming from a position of strength? What that means is that we invoke the logical part of our brains. One way of doing that is to just pause. When we pause, we can become more self-aware. We can question our thoughts. We can come to terms with the emotions that we're facing. And then we can start grappling with them. This fear that I'm facing, this fear that I'm experiencing, is it a real fear? What's the probability of it actually being realized? I can ask myself those questions, but I have to pause. I can become more self-aware. I can listen to my heartbeat, listen to my breath. I can take a moment, take a deep breath. And what I'm doing is, I'm distancing myself from my elephant, from the emotions. I'm distancing myself just enough from the threat so that the logical part of my brain can get engaged. Because what's needed right now is for me to make a good decision. Coming from a position of strength means I'm making the conscious choice of making the best decision for me. I'm making the conscious choice to manifest a better version of myself in this situation. A version of myself that I'm proud of. Because that version will make me feel better about myself. Once I feel better about myself, I'll function more effectively. So the science of well-being says, don't ignore the fear, don't ignore those emotions or those thoughts, but come to terms with them. And once you do, then perhaps you could invite a bit of logic to the table. And as a result of that, you'll function from a position of strength. As a result of that, you might engage in behavior that you're proud of. So that when you go to the supermarket and you see 10 bottles of hand sanitizer there, you can look at it from a 30,000-foot level. That's coming from a position of strength. You can look at it from a different perspective. That's coming from a position of strength. And you can say, you know what? I don't need all 10 bottles of hand sanitizer. I just need one because I've got plenty of soap and water in my house. Maybe I'll leave the 9 for those who really need it. I don't have a baby, so I don't need baby wipes. I'll manage some other way. I'll care for the 100 other people that need this stuff. That's coming from a position of strength. That's coming from a responsible position. That's taking action that we're proud of. That will make us feel better about ourselves, and then as a result of that, we will function more effectively. That's what the science of well-being teaches us. That's how we should behave during times of crisis. Assess the situation, be more self-aware, focus on the threat, but also focus on ourselves. Focus on who we want to be in that situation, so that we can be people that we're proud of. manifesting better versions of ourselves. This isn't easy, but it can be done if we're mindful and thoughtful enough to come from a position of strength. Try it and let me know. More to come. Thank you.